Has the rand been shaken by the strike that we saw yesterday close to the Standard Bank offices by the National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa?
Morning, Godfrey. At this stage, doesn't seem that the rand has reacted much to the strike action that we're seeing. The rand has continued to benefit from improved risk appetite late last week and early this week. Of course, that comes after the Greek Parliament ratified that debt bailout package. So at the moment, the rand still seems to be riding that wave, is trading in the low 670s. However, looking forward, we think it would be difficult for the currency to maintain these levels. We're seeing softer commodity prices, and of course, in the absence of international data this week, or important international data this week, investors are far more likely to pay attention to domestic developments such as the strike action that we saw. So we don't think that there's much scope for the rand to strengthen further from these levels. If it does weaken, the next level we'd be looking for is about 676, 679. But if it does strengthen below the 670 level, then we'd be looking for a 666.
Yeah, indeed. Do you see the potential, though, that perhaps the investors could begin selling the rand again should the strike that we saw begin? Should there be increases in the number of strikes that we see across the economy?
That certainly is a real possibility, Godfrey. Although the rand did strengthen substantially yesterday, that was amidst quite thin volumes because the US markets were closed for a holiday. So now with volumes having normalized with those markets open, and as I mentioned, there's quite thin on the international data front and local data front this week. So it makes it far more likely that investors are going to pay increased attention to events such as this. And of course, should there be a spike in risk aversion as a consequence of the strikes, that will undoubtedly be reflected in the rand.
Yeah. Now, what about the whole Greek situation, where we're getting these different voices in terms of what the bailout of Greece means for the markets? On the one hand, you have people saying, yeah, so Greece has been resolved. On the other, you actually have others like S&P. I was discussing earlier on with Warwick Lucas here, and Standard & Poor's position that perhaps even if there's a resolution, it doesn't in their book mean that Greece is not defaulted.
Yeah, absolutely, Godfrey. That still is a key risk, and what we've been emphasizing all along is that even if the bailout package in Greece went ahead, this certainly doesn't spell the end of troubles for the Eurozone, because we view this crisis as more of a systemic one as opposed to related specifically to one country. But as far as Greece specifically is concerned, these statements by Standard & Poor's could undoubtedly result in a rise in risk aversion. We're not seeing that at the moment, but that certainly is a possibility, and it's one of the reasons why we see the rand trending weaker this week as opposed to stronger.
Yeah, so let's talk about the local picture then. Yesterday were those national vehicle sales coming out of the local industry, suggesting some kind of recovery, but still very muted.
Well, it certainly was a strong rebound from the depressed levels that we saw in May. There was some suspicion at the time when the May numbers came out that they may have been depressed by the fact that there were a number of public holidays in that month. And the latest data does seem to confirm that we saw quite a strong rebound, particularly in passenger sales, passenger vehicle sales, and also in export sales. So looking forward, we still think that the outlook for that particular sector is quite positive. We're expecting the momentum in sales growth to moderate, but with interest rates still at record lows and very low prices coming through for new passenger vehicles, the outlook still looks pretty bright. So we wouldn't be unduly dismayed by the number that we saw in June.
Yeah, but what did you read in those numbers in terms of the health of the local economy? Are we seeing a consumer that's coming back more into the market and beginning to buy again? Or as you are saying, are we seeing just a rebound from what was a poor number and an unusual number at that?
I think that there was probably an element of both in the June numbers. You have to remember that sales of passenger vehicle sales were up quite strongly and took us quite by surprise. But that has been a pattern that we've seen for most of this year, where it's been passenger vehicle sales that have been recovering, whereas sales of trucks, light, medium and heavy commercial vehicles do appear to be lagging at this point. But certainly the numbers that we saw in June were also helped by a very strong recovery in exports. So I think that you could definitely say that the passenger vehicle sales, and so on the consumer side, demand still appears to be quite strong, as I mentioned, buoyed by very low interest rates and very low price increases for cars in that category. But it is of concern that commercial vehicle sales do appear to be lagging somewhat.
Lastly, Nomvuyo, what about the Saki Business Consumer Index that we're going to get out this morning? What are you expecting out of that number? Any likely impact on the rand?
I don't think that the rand is going to be shaken by this number. It will obviously be of interest because it's a shorter term indicator of how business confidence is faring. We saw that number dip slightly in May, and so we'd be hoping to see a recovery in June. Of course, that would give us an indicator of overall business sentiment for the quarter. And this tends to be a bit of a leading indicator as far as business investment decisions are concerned. So certainly as far as the growth outlook is concerned, we would be hoping to see a rebound in that number for June.